What is stronger, the steel of machines or the will of men behind them? At dawn, the mist of Donetsk glowed crimson, not from the sun but from fire. They said drones would replace soldiers. They were wrong. In this war, ghosts of steel move under trembling human hands, guided not by circuits but by fear, courage, and the strange calm between. Every click, every command is a heartbeat between life and silence. Subscribe, not just for a report, but for the unseen stories of those who fight with courage instead of comfort. The world calls it modern equipment, the perfect blend of precision and destruction. Yet on this battlefield, perfection shatters. Donetsk, October 3rd, year 2025. Russian armored brigades advance through the morning haze, a spear of engines and thunder. Across the ruined plain, Ukrainian operators prepared their drones, their faces pale in the flicker of screens. The hum of propellers replaced the sound of breathing. The war was no longer about ground or flags. It was about who could hold their nerve when machines failed and human hearts began to falter. The fog had not yet lifted when Lieutenant Mykola wiped the frost from his headset visor. The field before him was a pale grey sea, broken only by black silhouettes of wrecked trees and the distant pulse of artillery. Each blast made the ground tremble like a living creature in pain. Inside the mobile command van, 5 screens glowed faintly. Drones drifted across them, tiny mechanical birds gliding through smoke. Mykola's hand hovered above the control stick, trembling not from fear but from cold. Behind him, Corporal Danlo murmured coordinates under his breath, his voice almost lost beneath the hum of generators. 3 tanks, direction east-northeast, Danilo said. Range, 1,000 meters, and closing. Mykola adjusted his focus. The first Russian column crawled along the dried riverbed like a steel serpent. Their formation was textbook perfect. Advance, cover, reload, repeat. But perfection on paper never survived contact with the real world. Send the first swarm, he ordered quietly. A low whine filled the air as 6 FPV drones rose into the mist. Through the camera feed, Mykola saw the world in shades of green and white. The riverbed gleamed like glass. The tanks glowed as bright heat signatures. The first drone found its mark. A flash, then silence. The explosion came 2 seconds later, an orange bloom that tore the fog apart. Danilo shouted something Mykola did not hear. Another tank fired, its shell missing by a breath. The screen shook violently. Static filled the signal. Reacquire. Mykola barked. Stay on them. The second wave launched, smaller, but faster. Mykola switched to manual control. The feed flickered. The drone's wings caught the rising heat of burning oil. He saw soldiers running as small figures lost between smoke and dust. Some fired upward, desperate, their bullets tracing white lines through the air. One drone was hit, spiraling down. Mykola's breath stopped. For a heartbeat he saw through its dying lens, the reflection of dawn on a steel hull, the shadow of men scattering. Then it went dark. He leaned back, pulse hammering. 2 targets down, Danilo reported. Mykola nodded, eyes fixed on the map. The Russians were regrouping. Somewhere in that fog, another wave was forming. He whispered, almost to himself, "Hold the line, just hold it." Outside, the mist thickened again, swallowing the smoke, the flames, and the cries of engines rising for another assault. When the fire faded, only smoke remained. Sergeant Petrov crawled from the shallow crater, his ears ringing, his breath thick with the taste of ash. The fog that had once concealed their advance now clung to the ground like a burial shroud. Around him lay fragments of armor, twisted by heat and time. Somewhere behind the ridge, a tank engine screamed its last note and fell silent. Petrov tore off his helmet and stared at the sky. Gray, motionless, merciless. Above the haze, invisible drones still circled like vultures. Each buzz made his skin tighten. He pressed his back against a shattered wall, counting a 1, 2, 3s, waiting for another strike. Nothing came. Only the wind moaned through the skeletons of burned vehicles. "Sergeant, orders." A voice crackled through the half-melted radio on his chest. He hesitated. "Me." There were no orders left to give. The column was gone, their command channels silent. He switched frequencies, catching fragments of static and a distant voice screaming coordinates before the signal died again. "Fall back to Sector 9, he murmured, though no one was listening. Petrov moved through the ruins, stepping over debris that had once been comrades. Their names blurred together: Alexei, Roman, Mikhail, men who had believed in something clearer than this fog. He remembered how they had joked that morning, confident, invincible. Now their laughter was scattered dust. He found a narrow trench, half collapsed, and slid inside. The mud was warm from the explosions. In the distance, Ukrainian drones still burned across the sky, faint dots trailing thin ribbons of smoke. The battlefield had gone strangely quiet. It was the kind of silence that did not comfort Ash. It accused. From his pocket, Petrov took a small metal icon, a keepsake from his mother. The paint had peeled, but the shape of the angel remained. He rubbed it with a trembling thumb and whispered, "For all of us." Then he looked again at the horizon, where faint bursts of light flickered through the fog like dying stars. Suddenly, through the smoke, a sound reached him. Not gunfire, but voices. Ukrainian soldiers, moving cautiously, clearing the field. He froze. He froze. One step, one sound, and he would be found. But they passed by, their shadows long and wavering, not monsters, just men. When they were gone, Petrov exhaled. His radio hissed again, faint and broken, like the breath of a dying machine. Command. Chediv. Regroup. Counter. The word echo AC counter before vanishing into static. He stared into the mist. So, the war had not ended here. It was only changing shape. Fire of Donetsk was dying, but somewhere beyond this smoke, another blaze was being prepared. He rose slowly, the fog wrapping around him once more, as if the earth itself refused to release its soldiers. At 4 hours and 30 minutes in the morning, the eastern sky over Cherniv split open. The first Iskander missile did not fall. It descended like a verdict. A white line carved across the horizon, followed by a bloom of light so fierce it swallowed the color from the world. The sound arrived seconds later, a deep, rolling thunder that tore through the frozen soil and flung shards of glass across the command station. Sasha shielded her face as the shockwave slammed the room. The monitors flickered, maps dissolving into static. Her headset screeched, then silence. For a heartbeat, only her pulse existed. Then the second strike hit. Power offline. Systems down. A technician shouted. Switch to manual, Sasha ordered. Her voice cracked, but did not falter. She pushed through the smoke, reached the backup console, and forced the system awake. On the surviving feed, she saw fire rows of trucks, burning like candles on a dark altar. The Iskander had struck the UAV storage zone. They aimed for the heart, she whispered. Outside, the air was thick with ash. Engineers ran between explosions, dragging wounded operators out of the shelters. A drone's half-burnt frame lay beside the gate, its carbon wings still smoldering. Sasha crouched beside it, touching the broken camera lens as if it were a fallen soldier. "Is the data core intact?" she asked. "Maybe, partially. The servers are damaged. Then we save what remains. Copy the coordinates. Secure the AI logs. If we lose the data, we lose everything." They worked in darkness, guided by the red emergency lights that painted every face in shades of blood. The helm of backup generators began to pulse again, weak but alive. Through the half-repaired screen, Sasha watched the sky. More drones appeared. Russian Giron 2s circling like hawks over prey. "Stay low," she said quietly. "Oh, they are hunting." Moments later, a flash lit the compound. One of the surviving trucks erupted, scattering shrapnel through the snow. The heat rolled in waves. "Evacuate the west sector," Sasha shouted. "Move to Bunker 2. Someone hesitated. "Captain, what about the servers?" Sasha looked at the burning machines, then at the faces waiting for her answer. Mikola's words echoed in her mind. "Hold the line, even if it's just a signal." "We take the drives," she said finally. "People first, data second. But we do not leave the eyes of Ukraine blind." As they fled across the ruined field, the last Iskander fell. The explosion swallowed the station, scattering embers across the frost. In the mirror of her visor, Sasha saw the reflection of the fire, and the faint light of a single drone still airborne, climbing higher, carrying the last surviving signal into the dawn. The road to Leh was silent, except for the crackle of distant fires. Sasha walked at the front, her rifle slung across her back, a hard drive clutched to her chest like a relic. Beside her, Yura and Lysenko limped through the drifting ash, their boots crunching on shattered glass. The horizon was bruised black and orange. The village ahead was only a silhouette, half buried in smoke. Every few minutes, the hum returner, the mechanical whine of a Giron 2 somewhere above. They froze, faces pressed to the ground, listening. The sound swelled, circled, then faded away again. Yura muttered, "It knows we are here." "Then we stay small," Sasha said. "Machines hunt patterns. We move like ghosts." Kandazambal. They reached the first street of Leh. Houses stood roofless, walls scorched, windows melted into grey tears. A dog barked once, then disappeared into the ruins. The air smelled of metal and burned wheat. Suddenly, Yura stopped. Among the debris lay a Russian soldier, half buried, his armor twisted, breathing in short gasps. Blood soaked the snow around his waist. His eyes fluttered open when he saw them. "Please," he whispered in broken Ukrainian. Lysenko raised his rifle. "We cannot take," Sasha cut him off. "He is unarmed." "Captain, he is the enemy." She knelt beside the soldier. "And still human." From her pouch, she pulled a field dressing, pressed it against the wound. The man trembled, staring at her as if unable to believe mercy existed here. "Why?" he murmured. "'Cause war already took enough," Sasha said quietly. The sound came again, louder this time. The Giron 2 was back, descending through the smoke. A sharp tone echoed from its targeting array. Red dots danced across the ground. "Move," she shouted. "It has locked on." They ran into an alley, dragging the wounded man between them. The drone's camera followed, scanning for heat. Sasha ripped off her jacket, covering the soldier's body, then pulled out her handheld controller, the last operational drone in her pack. "Captain, that one's not flight-tested," Yura warned. "It does not have to be perfect," she replied. "Just loud." She launched it. The small craft rose, sputtering, its rotors whining like a dying bird. But it climbed fast enough to catch the Giron's attention. The Russian drone veered, chasing the false signal. Sasha watched as the two dots merged on the radar, then disappeared in a flash of light. The shockwave rattled the walls. Dust rained down. When the echo faded, the sky was empty. The three of them stayed still for a long time. The rescued soldier stared at Sasha, speechless. "That was your last drone," Yura whispered. Sasha looked up at the pale horizon. "Then we go on foot," she said. "Even without machines, we still move." Far away, thunder rolled again. Another battle, another dawn. But for the first time, the sound seemed less like war and more like memory. By dawn on the 5th of October, the smoke above Cherniv had thinned to a pale veil. The snow that fell overnight softened the ruins, hiding the scars but not the silence. Sasha sat by the broken window of a farmhouse, her uniform torn, her hands blackened with soot. The rescued Russian soldier slept in a corner, breathing shallowly. Yura was outside scanning the empty road with a pair of cracked binoculars. The radio hissed in fragments. Fragments of other worlds, coordinates, lost commands, prayers disguised as reports. Command Unit Bravo, relocating to Sector 2, battery depleted. Sasha adjusted the dial until only a faint heartbeat of static remained. She preferred that sound. It reminded her that someone was still out there. The hard drive she had carried through fire lay on the table, wrapped in cloth. It was the last record of the drone network, coordinates, signal codes, the data of hundreds of flights. More than machinery, it was memory. She whispered, "You held the eyes of Ukraine." Outside, a gust of wind swept through the barnyard, lifting a piece of metal into the air. It clanged softly against the frozen wall, like a muted bell. Yura entered, face pale. "Captain, scouts say the front is gone. Everyone is falling back to Kramen. We are cut off." Sasha looked at him for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "Then we are the rear now." Yura shook his head. "We have no fuel, no drones, no command. But we have the signal," she said, touching the transmitter. "If one message goes through, we are not finished." She powered up the small backup radio as its range barely a few kilometers. The antenna hummed weakly. "This is Unit Phoenix," she spoke slowly, transmitting final coordinates and remaining personnel count. "Data drive secured. Request acknowledgement." No response. Only wind. She tried again. "We still see. We still fight." Then she released the button. Through the shattered window she saw the faint light of morning crawling over the horizon. The fields were littered with the carcasses of machines, their metallic bones gleaming beneath the frost. For a moment, it was peaceful. No fire, no drones, only the whisper of the wind moving through the wreckage of modern equipment. Yura came to stand beside her. "Do you think anyone heard?" Sasha smiled. "Someone always does, even if it is only the sky." They stood there, listening as distant thunder rolled again, perhaps artillery, perhaps a storm. It did not matter. The sound carried the same truth. The war was no longer about territory or power, but about endurance. Somewhere beyond the clouds, a single drone-age battered, half-blinder still flew, its signal faint but alive, tracing the same message she had spoken. "We still see. We still fight." When the guns finally fell silent, the land of Donetsk and Chernihiv lay veiled in frost and smoke. No victory banners were raised, no songs were sung out, only the faint hiss of wind sliding through the wreckage. Amid twisted steel and scattered helmets, the shape of war lingered like a memory refusing to fade. They said technology would end the suffering. They said military equipment would make war clean, swift, and certain. But the fields told another story, of hands trembling on controls, of hearts breaking behind the glow of monitors, of courage born not from circuits but from conscience. Sasha stood at the edge of the ruined road, the radio pressed to her chest. The transmitter had died hours ago, yet she still listened, as if believing that somewhere in the vast hum of the ether her message had taken root. Behind her, the rescued soldier stirred, his uniform now the same color as hers, grey with ash, equal in defeat, equal in survival. Above them, the sky began to clear. Far away, the drone that carried her last signal drifted between clouds, a faint glimmer against the dawn. It had no weapon left, no power to strike, yet it endured as like a shadow that outlives the spear that cast it. In the end, that is what remains of every war. Not glory, not territory, but fragments of military equipment rusting into the earth and the memories of those who once moved them with trembling hands. The machines fall silent, but the people wondered their will, their doubt, their small defiance become the real architecture of survival. Sasha closed her eyes. For the first time in days, she felt no fear. The world was still burning somewhere beyond the horizon, but here, among ruins and silence, she found a strange peace. Because even when the military equipment sleeps, the spirit that commands it does not. It lingers like an echo in the fog, like the hum of an unseen engine, like the heartbeat of those who still believe that endurance is its own kind of victory.